Hello! This video is going to be a little bit different between my normal uploads. I normally upload campaign videos or campaign diaries or whatever you would call it, but this time I thought I would do something a little different and kind of expand the content on the channel while in between uploads of campaigns. So I thought today I would do a video about D&D history, D&D lore, and D&D monsters. I think I'll make a couple of videos about these topics, but for now I thought I would do a video about the Beholder. I believe the Beholder is probably the most iconic D&D monster besides dragons, and I thought I would do a history video about it, where it comes from, its lore, its edition history, and all that stuff. Now, I know there's probably videos out there that do a much better in-depth detail than I can, but I still want to give it a crack at it. I do recommend, though, a channel if you're super into the old school D&D history and how the game really worked back then. I recommend this channel called Daddy Rolled a 1. I've been subscribed to that channel for a very long time. I think they make very, very good high-quality content and very in-depth detail of the history of D&D. So now, if that's something that interests you, then I will link the channel down in the description below. I highly recommend their channel. Great videos and very in-depth detail and history about D&D's early years. That being said, I thought today I would do a history of the Beholder. Now let's get into the history, the real-world history of the Beholder. Now, most D&D monsters can trace their origins to folklore or mythology throughout the world, and most D&D creators and designers get inspired by that and create their own twists or versions on that specific monster. But the Beholder is actually quite unique. It was created from the ground up. The Beholder is an actual original creation for D&D, and it's not based on any creature from mythology or fiction. Its creator, Rob Kuntz, and his brother Terry Kuntz created the Beholder for Gary Gygax's first campaign setting, which is Greyhawk. Alright, let's talk about D&D's very early years. So Dungeons & Dragons was created in 1974, or at least it was published in 1974. I can go into a whole nother video about D&D's entire history, but I'll save that for another video. What's important is that the Beholder was introduced in D&D's first supplement or campaign setting, we would call it today, and that would be Greyhawk, and that was introduced in 1975. Like I said before, the creators of the Beholder was Rob Kuntz and his brother Terry Kuntz, and they created the Beholder for Gary Gygax's Greyhawk setting. Now, at the beginning of its inception and when it was first revealed, it wasn't called the Beholder, it was called something else. It was called the Sphere of Many Eyes, or the Eye Tyrant. Then I believe Rob Kuntz officially changed the name to the Beholder. Its design never really changed. It's actually the same design that we still have today. I think it's the design that we're all familiar with. It later appeared in 2 books in D&D's first kind of couple years. It was in a companion rule set in 1984, and then it appeared later in 1991, and it appeared in Dungeons & Dragons Rules Encyclopedia. Alright, so let's skip ahead to Advanced Dungeons & Dragons First Edition. So this is going to be from the years 1977 through 1988. So with the release of Advanced Dungeons & Dragons First Edition, the Beholder appeared in the First Edition Monster Manual, which was in 1977. There, it was described as a hateful, aggressive, and avaricious spherical monster, which I find pretty funny. And apparently it was found in most dungeons like we find today. And believe it or not, Ed Greenwood, the creator of the Forgotten Realms and Faerun, I think most of you guys would be familiar with that with Baldur's Gate 3, authored a ecology of the Beholder, which first appeared in Dragon magazine, specifically issue 76, in August 1983. So we're going to jump to Advanced Dungeons & Dragons 2nd edition. This is from the years 1989 to 1999. 2nd edition supplements to Advanced Dungeons & Dragons, especially those Spelljammer campaign settings, added further details to these classic creatures, to their society, to their culture, and more to their history and in-game lore. Spelljammer is where the Beholder definitely has gotten its most unique and iconic features that we know today. There's plenty of supplements that came out during that time to really flesh out its lore. For an example, there was a lore book published back in 1989 called The Lore Book of the Void, and another lore book, or I would say a monster manual companion, the Monstrous Compendium Volume 1, also released in 1989 and then reprinted back in 1993 as the Monstrous Manual. That's where we would see most of its iconic lore that we know today. And I feel like a lot of people don't really realize how important Spelljammer is to not only Beholders, but other aberrations that we find today in, I would say, 5th edition and 5.5. A lot of those monsters came from Spelljammer and actually had their histories and lore and all that stuff really expanded upon in that booklet. Now we're getting on more to the modern day. We're starting here at Dungeons & Dragons 3rd edition from the year 2000 to 2002. This is where I would say we're seeing more of the modern design of not only D&D and how D&D is viewed today. So 3rd edition included the Beholder in its first monster manual back in 2000. Later expansions gave different variants. That's when we're starting to see different variants of Beholders, like Spectators and the Gibbering Orb and Death Tyrants. But most of those other variants were also in earlier editions, but this is when we're seeing them become more of their own separate kind of entities. So we're jumping on to Dungeons & Dragons 3.5. Now, 3.5 ran from 2003 to 2007, and the Beholder appears in the revised Monster Manual for that edition. They also made a new variant of the Beholder called the Mind Witness. Now, before I kind of get into detail about the Mind Witness, I kind of have to jump back a little bit back in time here. TSR was the original company that owned Dungeons & Dragons. But in the late 90s, that's when they were having some financial trouble. And I believe in 1997, that's when Wizards of the Coast bought TSR, and now they own the Dungeons & Dragons property. Their first edition, when they were owning Dungeons & Dragons, was 3rd edition. Just to kind of give some context about that. So the Mind Witness is half a Illithid and half Beholder. So it uses all the psionic powers of an Illithid / Mind Flayer, and uses the aberrational power of the Beholder. Now, Beholders would actually get their own chapter in a book in 2005 called Lords of Madness, the Book of Aberrations. That's when we'll see more variants that are in Dungeons & Dragons today in 5th edition. So moving on to Dungeons & Dragons 4th edition, which was from the years 2008 to 2014. Now, there's not a lot to say about 4th edition. To kind of give a context about what was going on in 4th edition here. 4th edition was trying to compete with World of Warcraft and a lot of MMOs at the time for attention for players, because a lot of people moved on from D&D at this point to play video games or discovered other tabletop RPGs. So Wizards of the Coast were kind of backed into a corner here and trying to figure out what was the best way to move D&D forward. Again, I can make a whole video about 4th edition or the really history about it, but just to kind of give a brief context. So the state of the game at this point wasn't really focused on lore or history or anything really like that. It was more focused on combat and miniature combat, so a lot of details for monsters and things like that weren't really expanded upon. But we did get some variants at this time. There were two variants of beholders at the time. So there was the Eye of Flame and the Eye of Frost beholder. Now, so moving on to, I would say, the modern day D&D. So this is D&D 5th edition slash 5.5. So 5th edition came out in the year 2014, and 5.5 came out in 2024. Now, I would say out of all the editions, this is where we get a lot of variants in different sorts of beholders and the more expansion of their lore here as well. I feel like 2nd edition was where they set the foundation. This is where they build upon it. So the beholder appears alongside many variants, such as the Death Tyrant and Zombie beholder in the Monster Manual in 2014. Then Volo's Guide to Monsters in 2016 added more detail to beholder culture and contained stats for the Death Kiss, the Gonth, the Gazer, which are different types of beholder kin. And then the Mind Witness makes its appearance back here in the Xanathar's Guide to Everything in 2017. Speaking of Xanathar, I think Xanathar is probably the most iconic beholder, since he actually has a lot of backstory and lore, and he appears in the adventure campaign Waterdeep Dragon Heist in 2018. So that was just the brief history of beholders in each edition of Dungeons and Dragons. Now I kind of want to go into their lore for a bit. A beholder is an aberration comprising a floating sphere-like body with a large fanged mouth and a single eye on the front, and many flexible eye stalks on top of its body. Each eye of the beholder possesses a different magic ability. The main eye projects as a anti-magic cone. Other eyes had different spell-like abilities, such as disintegrate, transmute flesh to stone, cause sleep, slow the motion of objects or beings, charm animals or humanoids, induce fear, or levitate objects. Many variants of beholders exist, such as observers, spectators, eyes of the deep, elder orbs, hive mothers, and death tyrants. In addition, some rarer beholders can use their eyes for non-standard spell-like abilities. These mutant beholders are often killed or exiled. Some beholders actually have a sense of religion and worship a goddess known as the Great Mother. Not all of them do, as they believe they are the perfect being and they must be worshipped. Beholders are extremely xenophobic, not only to other races, but even to themselves. Beholders believe that they are the perfect beings, and if something is not perfect, it must be destroyed. And they will wage war with each other, even for the slight different appearance of one another. But the most prominent exception to that is hive mothers, who use their power of mind control to control other beings and other beholders to their whims, and they will form colonies in the Underdark, and even wage war with other denizens of the Underdark, such as Drow and Illithids. Alright, after going over their lore, I kind of want to go over the different variants of beholders. Now, there are too many to count, and there are so many in different editions and different settings. I don't think I'll cover them all, but I'm going to pick a handful that I think are the most interesting. The Eye Tyrant would be considered like the standard beholder, the one that is the most iconic and most recognizable. So the standard beholder, or known as an Eye Tyrant, has 10 eye stalks, with spells such as Charm Monster, Charm Person, Disintegration, Flesh to Stone, Telekinesis, Slow, Sleep, and Cause Fear. Its also central eye causes a anti-magic cone. The Elder Orb is a rarer, stronger, and bigger variant of the traditional Beholder. Born every 100 years or so, these stronger variants are 15 feet in diameter and have very long lifespans. Elder Orbs are very skilled at arcane magic. A Hive Mother is a even more rare variant, even more rare than Elder Orbs. These beholders are quite different. They have an innate ability to magically dominate other beings and other beholders. Though they have no eye stalks, they still have the traditional traits of a beholder, such as having more common spells, such as Charm Monster, Charm Person, Disintegrate, Sleep, Fear, Finger of Death, Flesh to Stone, and Telekinesis. A Death Tyrant is an undead variant of Beholder that has retained some of its magical ability and intelligence. Most powerful wizards use them as guardians to protect treasure, protect artifacts, or some arcane tomes. A Death Kiss is a different variant of Beholder. It still has the same characteristic as a Beholder, has a central eye, but instead of eye stalks, it has these long tentacles that are hooked and barbed. This beholder is more of a vampiric, parasitic beholder. It uses its tentacles to wrap around prey and suck their blood. So that was our overview of the beholder and its general history in D&D. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I had a fun time making it, and I love learning about D&D history and learning about the game. And I hope you got some enjoyment out of that. Now, I know this is not content that I normally upload to the channel. I try to strictly kind of upload our campaign videos, but I thought I would do something different and expand the channel. And if you guys do like this type of video content, then please consider subscribing. I know I don't really ask about that too much or really ask anyone to subscribe, but if you like to subscribe, then that's there for you. But other than that, I will see you guys next time.